Kazunari is a high school student who had a lonely 3 years in high school, so his only wish is to have a peaceful high school life and hopefully find a girlfriend. One day he goes to the library, and he sees a girl named Ritsu Kawai and immediately forms a crush on her. Kazunari's parents have moved away for work, so he has the opportunity to live on his own in a dormitory. But problems immediately start for him when he meets his new roommate Shirosaki acting suspiciously. This also gets him into trouble with the police. When he arrives in his new dorm, he meets the manager Sumiko, who shows him around. Kazunari is uncertain about living there because he will lack privacy until he learns his crush Ritsu lives in the dorm as well. Kazunari decides to try his best to stay in the dorm, as it will give him the opportunity to hopefully get to know Ritsu. She also mostly stays in the girls' area of the dormitory. Sumiko quickly notices that Kazunari is trying to get close to Ritsu, however, so she decides to encourage and help him since Ritsu is her grandniece. However, although Kazunari tries to act friendly towards Ritsu, she acts coldly towards him and doesn't seem to notice his feelings. Shirosaki tries to cheer up Kazunari by giving him advice, and he mentions there are 2 other residents. Kazunari soon meets Mayumi, an emotional office lady who he finds angrily crying about a recent breakup. She is obsessed with romance and often goes out to drink when feeling depressed, and when she gets into an altercation with Kazunari, Ritsu arrives to help break up the argument and introduce them to each other. Mayumi later apologizes to Kazunari for acting so emotionally after the breakup. The months pass and Kazunari adjusts to living in the dorm. He tries to determine what Ritsu's hobbies and interests are and discovers that she likes reading. But since Kazunari doesn't have many hobbies of his own, he quickly becomes bored. He rejects joining Shirosaki with his hobbies when he runs into Mayumi having another emotional breakdown due to a breakup. This leads to him helping to cheer her up by creating bubbles with Shirosaki. The 3 of them play with soap bubbles together, but since they pop quickly, it reminds Mayumi the fleeting nature of relationships. Meanwhile, Ritsu watches them from afar, clearly interested in playing with the bubbles. Kazunari asks if she would like to join, but the shy Ritsu refuses so she can read in the courtyard. But it becomes clear that she is really interested, so the dorm residents insist she join them. Ritsu ends up having a good time with them, but out of embarrassment she ends up slapping Kazunari. Later he helps Shirosaki and Mayumi with laundry, and bonds with the 2 of them over stories of high school. Sumiko notices, so she suggests Ritsu and Kazunari work together on laundry as a way to make small talk. But although Kazunari attempts to chat with her, Ritsu continues to mostly ignore him. Fortunately, Kazunari is able to make a good joke which causes her to laugh together with him, and the 2 of them end up bonding a little. Later, when the residents all decide to watch scary movies together, he discovers that Ritsu is also terrified of scary things like him when she cries during a movie. Meanwhile, he meets the last resident of the dorm, college student Sayaka, who has a sweet exterior, but a mischievous nature who likes to prank and manipulate others. Although Kazunari has made much progress in the following weeks getting to know Ritsu and the other residents, and he has learned more aspects of her personality, such as her humor, her interest in reading, and her fear of scary things, he still feels that they are awkwardly distant with each other. To make matters worse, Sayaka has also discovered his crush on Ritsu, and she starts to make plans. Kazunari gets a bike to ride to school to see if he can get Ritsu to ride with him to school, but a confused Ritsu turns him down, saying not in a million years. After he bikes off, the rest of the residents tease them, including Sumiko. But Ritsu reminds them that she is the true owner of the dormitory, so she could easily raise the rent by 50%, and they quickly fall into line. Later at school, Ritsu tells Kazunari that her rejection to use the bike doesn't mean that she hates him. That evening, Kazunari walks into pandemonium in the living room. Mayumi's ex-boyfriend has unexpectedly contacted her, which has made Mayumi very anxious, and her behavior starts to annoy the other residents. Meanwhile, Ritsu has a troubled reaction to the situation, and Kazunari wonders if something is wrong. Mayumi goes on her date, which goes terribly, and Mayumi stands up for herself and leaves. She returns home where Ritsu comforts her, and Kazunari finds out that Ritsu was just concerned about Mayumi because she reminds her of manga protagonists who always goes out with losers. The next day, Kazunari gets into trouble at the front of the dorm, where Sayaka is getting unwanted attention from a boy, so she uses Kazunari to get out of the situation. Before the other boy can beat him up over Sayaka, Ritsu is able to step in by throwing her book at him, and the police arrive with Shirosaki. Sayaka apologizes to Kazunari for the trouble, but when Kazunari tries to thank Ritsu, she gets embarrassed and tells him not to worry about it before leaving. After the incident, Sayaka asks Kazunari to take care of Ritsu by walking with her to school, and Sayaka is hoping that this could help improve their relationship. Later, Mayumi gets into another depressed episode over romance, so all the residents drink together. Mayumi complains that she lacks good female friendships because everyone she knows at work is chasing romance as well, and she drunkenly argues with Sayaka. Sayaka also points out that Ritsu doesn't have many friends herself, even though Kazunari tries to defend her. Ritsu states that she chooses to be alone, and that she has always been alone growing up. Her words upset Kazunari, and he wonders if she secretly wants friends but has trouble making them. He talks to her about making friends, but although she is impressed with his ability to make friends with the rest of the residents, he continues to misunderstand her discomfort on the subject. He eventually discovers at a bookstore that Ritsu does have friends, they just go to a different school. At first Ritsu ignores and runs away from him, but after he catches up to her, she firmly expresses her annoyance with him constantly worrying over her and that he should leave her alone. Later at the dorm, Ritsu thinks that she doesn't mind being alone, but she also doesn't want other people to think she is lonely. Shirosaki gives her some advice, and although she doesn't apologize to Kazunari, they continue to walk to school together. One day, Sayaka tells an uncomfortable and irritating story that leads to a conversation about how each of the three girls deals with guys. They quickly determine that Ritsu doesn't have experience in romance, and Sayaka starts to tease her by leaning in close. Kazunari wants to protect Ritsu so he blocks her, but Ritsu ends up kissing his arm by accident. Later, Kazunari wants to read more since Ritsu loves to read. He notices that Ritsu seems to be in a better mood when she is reading a particular book, so he starts to read it when he finds it in the living room. Ritsu catches him reading, and although happy to see him trying to read, she is embarrassed when she points out that she must like the book a lot because she seems happier than usual that day. Kazunari quickly finds the difficulty pretty hard to read, but he still continues to try. Later that evening, Shirosaki reveals that he used to write novels. This inspires the rest of the residents to play a storytelling game together. Meanwhile, Kazunari continues to read Ritsu's new favorite book. One day, Shirosaki finds the lost wallet of a girl named Chinatsu. A thankful Chinatsu sees Shirosaki working on a Pythagoras switch, a kind of game found on TV shows. Soon Chinatsu continues to visit, and she starts to encourage Shirosaki to finish the device after he starts to lose interest. Meanwhile, the rest of the residents become worried that Chinatsu might not have a lot of friends at school, and that's why she continues to visit. They try to persuade Chinatsu to find friends her own age, but Mayumi accidentally makes her cry and run away. Kazunari and Ritsu also notice other kids ignoring Chinatsu, confirming their fears, and later that day her mother arrives at the dorm to ask for help because Chinatsu has run away. They end up finding Chinatsu hiding in the dorm, and the residents apologize to her for their behavior. They give her advice on how to repair her friendships at school, and Chinatsu eventually fixes her problems at school. Days later, Chinatsu takes her new friends to the dorm to see Shirosaki's completed Pythagoras switch, and they all have dinner together. One day, there are reports of a suspicious person in the neighborhood of the dormitory. The residents decide on safety measures they should all take to be careful. Sumiko in particular becomes concerned, so she assigns Kazunari to walk Ritsu back home from school every day since she is always reading and not paying attention to her surroundings. This creates a good opportunity for Kazunari and Ritsu to get to know each other better. Eventually, the residents help to catch the suspicious person and the situation returns to normal. Later, as summer begins, Kazunari asks to recommend a book for him to read. Meanwhile, Sumiko takes them all to a nearby restaurant when the owner notices Kazunari might be a good fit for the traditional cafe. Everyone makes fun of Kazunari, and the next day he is persuaded to try the traditional uniform. Kazunari becomes very embarrassed, but he decides to take the job after Ritsu seems to enjoy seeing his new outfit. On his first day at work at the traditional cafe, Kazunari meets the unusual employees of the cafe including Hojo, who always uses poetry in his words, and Kurokawa, who talks about spirits all the time. Kazunari works hard and returns home feeling exhausted. He later gets invited by his school friend to a mixer, and with Mayumi and Sayaka's help, he discovers that one of the girls there is Hiyashi, a former classmate of his who has gone through a makeover to become more pretty. Though when Hiyashi figures out that Kazunari is invited, Hiyashi gets him disinvited to the mixer. The situation becomes awkward that evening, when the mixer actually goes to the cafe he works at. Meanwhile, the residents of the dorm decide to visit Kazunari at the cafe. Things at the cafe get worse, when several students at the mixer start to make fun of Kazunari, and they also make fun of his friend Tegami from school, and Hiyashi as well. Kazunari starts to feel hopeless since he just works there, but Ritsu steps in to help him. Mayumi and Sayaka also stand up for him as well and subtly scold Hiyashi. Feeling thankful, Kazunari returns home where the residents all eat a delicious meal by Sumiko together. One day, Mayumi gets into another episode due to a bad romance. The residents give her a guitar so she can have a heartbroken concert on the dormitory roof so that the rest of them can eat dinner and listen to her sad songs. Meanwhile, while listening to Mayumi play, Kazunari and Ritsu bond over family stories. Later, the residents of the dorm become terrorized over the presence of a centipede. They go to great lengths to find and destroy it, and while hunting the centipede, Kazunari gets burned protecting Ritsu from hot water. Eventually, Sayaka is able to take care of the centipede, since she is not afraid of bugs. But after Ritsu notices his injury, she becomes concerned and takes care of Kazunari. Weeks pass, and Kazunari is getting used to working at the cafe. He also appreciates that Ritsu has started to visit the cafe to read as well. Kazunari still feels bad about what happened with Tegami and Hiyashi and wonders about Hiyashi. One day, Shirosaki finds Hiyashi spying on Kazunari at the cafe. She reveals to him that both she and Kazunari were bullied in middle school. The girls would gossip that the two weird students should date each other, but Kazunari was not aware of this and he still treated her kindly. Hiyashi feels terrible that in the present, her actions lead to Kazunari getting bullied again, so she decides to formally apologize to Kazunari, who forgives her. Sayaka and Mayumi are not happy about this, but they also discover that Hiyashi has formed a crush on Kazunari's coworker, Kurokawa, because he resembles her past self. Meanwhile, Chinatsu decides to visit Shirosaki to ask him to help her on a summer project. The rest of the residents join in, but she accidentally makes Ritsu angry when she bluntly asks Ritsu if she is jealous when other girls are around Kazunari. Since Chinatsu's last visit, things have been awkward between Kazunari and Ritsu, as the two think about their growing feelings for each other. Meanwhile, Sayaka's friend from high school Tsunade arrives, and everyone is shocked because Sayaka and Tsunade seem to have opposite personalities. Mayumi and Kazunari try to interrogate Tsunade to get her to reveal embarrassing stories about Sayaka from their childhood together, but Tsunade ends up passing out after drinking too much instead. Later, everyone becomes shocked when Tsunade is revealed to be quite pretty, and that she purposefully dresses down to not attract attention. Meanwhile, a girl named Mimura starts to talk to Ritsu in the library, but she enjoys reading as a social activity. The two start to become friends, but Kazunari becomes worried when Mimura invites Ritsu to a mixer with her, and he decides to take action. The day of the gathering, Ritsu realizes that she has actually been invited to a mixer, and she starts to feel really uncomfortable being around strangers. She has some success in talking about books, but gets upset when another student makes a mean comment. Later, Ritsu returns to the dormitory, and she accidentally drunk some plum wine. She opens up about her bad experiences with her new friend, and complains about how easily Kazunari seems to make friends, since she finds friendship exhausting. The next morning, Ritsu and Kazunari agree to discuss the characters from the book she lent him, and she finds that Kazunari had written thoughtful notes about the book, which makes her happy. Meanwhile, Kazunari finally gathers the courage to ask for her contact information. And this is all for this video. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.